Nearly 40 years ago, a young Ursuline sister was one of 4 women raped and murdered while serving as a missionary in El Salvador. She was from Cleveland, Ohio. She was a teacher, a daughter, a colleague, a friend. She was an inspiration. But how do we make sense of such a tragedy? What has she left for us to know and understand about life, love, and faith? Though she is physically absent, we can know her. If she could speak with us, what would she tell us? These are her words as reported by her biographer, Sister Cynthia Glavin. She is Sister Dorothy Kazel. This is her story.
December 4th, 1980, El Salvador. 4 missionaries, 2 of the Cleveland Latin American mission team, and 2 Maryknoll sisters were found today, buried in a shallow grave near Santiago, Nanolco. Authorities confirmed that the 4 females were murdered after being sexually assaulted. The government of El Salvador has stated that there are no suspects at this time, but will conduct further investigation. The women were victims of government-sponsored violence and terrorism.
During the year before this horrific event, government-induced violence and terrorism had been increasing, and signs of approaching civil war were apparent. Yet Dorothy desired to remain in El Salvador to accompany her beloved poor, and she expressed this decision in a letter she wrote to her former missionary partner and friend, Sister Martha Owen.
Dear Martha, I do want to say something to you. I think you'll understand. We talked quite a bit today about what happens if something begins, and most of us feel we want to stay here, if there's a way we can help. I wouldn't want to just run out on the people. We think people we love should understand how we feel, in case something does happen. I thought I should say this to you because I don't want to say it to anyone else, because I don't think they'd understand. Anyway, my beloved friend, just know how I feel and treasure in your heart. If a day comes when others will have to understand, please explain it for me. Hello, Mom and Dad. Maybe I shouldn't tell you this so it doesn't scare you out of your liver. There have been things going on, but we have not been directly involved. The military haven't been against us except that I just have been called a communist. They always call us communists. The Guardia are like the National Guard, I guess you'd translate it as. The group that does all the killing all the time. They're right outside the church, right across the street from us. So anytime anything's going on in the church, they certainly can hear and listen to what we're saying. We're not saying anything bad or communistic as they claim we are. Martha, please keep this information to yourself. I don't know how much more I'll tell my parents. I just mention things to them, but I never go into detail as I do with you because I don't want to worry them unnecessarily. Let me be able to say, I must be about my Father's business. I have come to do the will of my Father.
Those perilous moments overshadow an all-American girl's past. In so many ways, Dorothy Kazel was just like any of us. Her life could have been that of numberless other young girls. The simplicity and innocence of those years held no hint of what was to come.
Hello again. This is me, your dear daughter who is still alive and safe and sound here in El Salvador. I thought I would at least make part of a tape and send it so that you will know that I really am okay. It's been so fulfilling to represent the Cleveland Diocese as a member of the Cleveland Latin American mission team. I could have never imagined growing up in Cleveland and then in suburban Euclid, Ohio, that one day I would be speaking to you from El Salvador. Both of you were the children of Lithuanian immigrants. I remember learning that our surname of Kozlowskis was changed to Kazel at the suggestion of Dad's supervisor at Standard Products. The supervisor noticed how much time it took Dad to write Kozlowskis on the many invoices he signed each day. My early memories are large and loving extended family.
My birthday, June 30th, 1939. Only 3 years after my brother Jim, my only sibling. We took trips to visit cousins on their farm in Fowler's Mill, rented a cottage every summer on the lake in Vermilion, traveled to California, saw the Painted Desert and the Grand Canyon. Kindergarten, 1944 at St. George's Parish School. There was one class for each grade where all the teachers and families knew each other. I spent 9 carefree years in this religious family atmosphere.
Dorothy was told that she never sat still, but was always bouncing around. Making friends in the neighborhood was easy. Her autograph book does show some teasing.
Roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so, well, maybe.
Fireman, fireman, be on your duty. Here comes Dorothy, the American beauty.
Lots of birthdays and pajama parties. I loved swimming and roller skating. And I took accordion lessons.
Dorothy's mother always said she was very creative. She tells about one Halloween when Dorothy was in 3rd grade and did not have a costume for her school party. On the day of the party, when she came home for lunch, Dorothy found some newspaper, cut out a dress, pinned it together, then wore it to school and won first prize for most original Halloween costume.
My grades were above average. Teachers noted that learning for me was easy and enjoyable. And I played my accordion at operettas and plays and in the school band. And I loved learning and performing the traditional Lithuanian dances. Then, high school at Notre Dame Academy on Ansel Road. I was always in the middle of whatever was going on. Student council, athletic association, sodality, mission club, dramatic club, and speech league. I was class president for 3 years. Senior year, I was accepted into the National Thespian Society and had a lead in Cheaper by the Dozen. All these articles in the school newspaper. Voted most cheerful. Lots more PJ parties. Here's one with us trying to smoke cigars. On February 13, 1955, I started dating Russell Smith, a friend of my brother Jim's from the neighborhood. Russ went to St. Joseph High School and gave me his class ring, but of course, I had to wear it on a chain around my neck since we were discouraged from going steady and not supposed to wear boys' rings during school hours. Oh, here, junior-senior prom diary entry. The big day finally arrived. We went to Mass at school, then Mare and I went down to get our hair done. I got wavy bangs.
It wasn't too bad.
That night, I got a beautiful corsage from Russ.
You looked real sharp.
I wore Mare's long blue formal. Blue's my favorite color. Russ told me I looked beautiful.
Afterwards, they went to Morocco's.
Then we ate dinner by candlelight. I'll never forget it. Russ graduated at the end of my junior year and enlisted in the Marines, but we stayed together by writing and seeing each other whenever he was on leave. When Russ left for the Marines, it was terrible. Mare and I cried so hard. We saw Russ and Jer off, and they looked like they were going to their doom. When we got back to school, we were suspended for a month, but we still think it was worth it to go send them off. Academically, I wasn't an extraordinary student. I always said that I wasn't a brain. Here's proof from my diary. Exams tomorrow. Ugh. I found out they're only taking 1 point off an error in our typing exam, so maybe I didn't flunk. Had our English test. I think I got about a C, I hope. I had a part-time job as a sales clerk at the Higby Company in downtown Cleveland, but my greatest love was roller skating. I took lessons at Skateland on Euclid Avenue, and I performed dance routines in skating called Roller Rebels, and I won first place in a beauty queen contest in the junior division. Then, when we moved to Euclid, I skated at the Rollerdrome. I went to skate meets, and I won second place in a beauty contest held for all the skaters. There were parties afterwards, lots of fun and lots of food. As a sodalist at Notre Dame Academy, I was expected to attend Mass daily and pray the rosary and novenas.
Her friend Fran said, Mass was something we did and enjoyed going to. We also said a rosary novena. We would say the prayers for each day.
We would sit around on either my bed or Marilyn's bed at her house, and if we didn't have the rosary said for that day, we would be sure to say it.
And Kay remembers going to pajama parties at her house, and they would go to Mass at 7 a.m., even though they had been up until 3, 4, or 5 in the morning.
Graduation day, June 2nd, 1957. Even though I'd been on a college prep track at Notre Dame, I really wasn't thinking of going to college. In fact, until junior year, I'd seriously considered a career in professional skating. But I was taking business courses since my mother said it would qualify me for a job anywhere. By the time senior year rolled around, I was still undecided, but eventually I applied to the Carnegie Institute in Cleveland. Then I came across a pamphlet about a new 2-year teaching training program at St. John College in Cleveland called the Cadet Program, which prepared teachers for teaching in Catholic schools. I knew I wanted to do this since I couldn't see myself in a commercial position, and I felt better suited to teach and direct children's lives. I decided to enroll, but my parents were not pleased. They couldn't afford to pay for college education, and like many parents at that time, they thought a college education was unnecessary for girls because they would eventually get married, have children, and wouldn't have to find a job. But I proceeded anyways and paid for my education with a series of part-time jobs.
So, early on, Dorothy was strong-minded and began to set her own path. Her instinctive desire to teach and have an influence on the lives of others was propelling her in a direction that hinted at a future unlike one she or her friends would have ever imagined for themselves.
At St. John's College, I constantly juggled between school and work, but my grades suffered, so I realized I had hit the books a bit more, and my grades improved. But that year brought another major life event. I met Donald Collenborn. Don was a soldier from Bakersfield, California, who was stationed at a military base in nearby Willowick, Ohio. I was working at Bailey Department Store when he came in to buy a sweater, and he said he'd come back to see me. He came back every day for 3 weeks and asked me out until eventually I agreed. I was still writing to rest overseas, but I started to see Don regularly. Eventually, he told me, "I'm not going to see you anymore until you decide who you're going to see." Well, it was a difficult decision, but I decided not to see Russ anymore, and my mother was not pleased. She liked Russ.
He was Lithuanian and Catholic, while Don does not share our ethnic background and belongs to no organized religion.
Many of my friends were friends with Russ and were against my breakup, but I had made my choice. Meanwhile, as I was earning my teaching certificate at St. John's, I did classroom lab hours at my parish, St. Robert Bellarmine Catholic Church in Euclid, which was staffed by the Ursuline Sisters of Cleveland. I'd come into contact with Ursulines at St. John's, but didn't get to personally know any Ursulines until I came to St. Robert Bellarmine School, particularly primary teachers Sister Helen Marie and Sister Anna Margaret. Don and I continued dating. We didn't have much money, so we went to the movies or bowling, or we just played cards at home. But our favorite place was just to sit alone together in the back of St. Robert's Church. We would sit for hours and just talk. Our love for each other deepened, and he began instruction in Roman Catholicism. Don asked me to marry him one day in the spring of 1959 while we were sitting together in the back of the church. I asked for a pearl engagement ring instead of a diamond. I told him that it wasn't an absolute certainty, but we set a date for August 5th, 1960. So I completed the cadet program and I got a job teaching 3rd grade at St. Robert's School while making plans for my wedding. We reserved the church for Mass, chose a hall, and paid a deposit, and picked our bridal party. But though I'd only spoke to my fellow teacher, Sister Helen Marie, and my confessors, Father Eldon Reichardt and Eugene Best, I'd begun to think about entering the convent. I didn't share my confusion with my childhood friends, and Don had no inkling of how my thoughts were running. I attended several retreats, and whenever I came back, Don said that I was different for a couple of days. One evening, I was praying alone in my bedroom and had a strong sense that I should enter the convent. The feeling was so vivid that I told my mother about it. For months afterwards, I prayed with all my heart and soul.
Don's military service ended that January, and he went back to California to finish college, so they had to keep in touch by mail.
I made a retreat for engaged women, and that was when I became convinced of the reality of my religious vocation. It came from a deep and natural place. My love for God and my desire to deepen my relationship with God were my primary motivations. I called Don in March to tell him that I was thinking of entering the convent and that I wanted to break our engagement. He was in absolute total disbelief and anger. He flew to Cleveland that very night and stayed for a week. We spent hours discussing my desire to become an Ursuline sister and decided that this decision needed more reflection. He went back to California, hoping that we'd stay together and see each other in the summer. But it wasn't meant to be. In May, I asked Father Wagner at St. Robert's to write me a letter of recommendation for entrance into the congregation of the Ursuline Sisters of Cleveland. He wrote,
Dorothy has been an inspiration to the children by her prayers, her devotion, and her daily communion. I have no doubt she is morally and spiritually well qualified for the religious life.
So, on June 29th, one day before my 21st birthday, and 1 month before I planned to be married, I formally applied to the Cleveland Ursuline congregation. I flew to California with my Aunt Lucy, where Don and I met several times and debated my religious vocation for a long time. We both reached the conclusion that entering the convent was the right move for me. I returned his ring. I think we must have talked for a couple hundred hours. I was mostly concerned about hurting Don because I knew that I loved him.
On the plane home, her aunt said, "Dorothy, you were in love with Don, and now you're giving it all up for God. There may come many days when giving up the world will be a terrible temptation for you."
I firmly told her, yes, I understand, but I must do what I feel I have to do.
Dorothy's friends have said that her spirituality was always integrated into her personality. It was very real to her. She understood spirituality to the point where she didn't need to talk about it. Some found her prayerfulness and spirituality unusual for a young woman of her age because of its depth. But growing up in a home where the sacramental life of the church was stressed made it a very natural thing for her to do that only deepened with time. Don said, to walk away and commit to something like religious life was a very startling thing for her, as well as for everyone else.
My struggle lay in choosing one state of life over another because they both appealed to me, and I feared that I would be unable to fulfill the demands of religious life, and I struggled because I knew my decision would affect more lives than just my own.
Her friend Donna knew that a part of her would always love Don. Part of her would always wonder what it would have been like to be married and to have kids, and that's something she really would have loved. But because of the calling she experienced, she felt that she really didn't have a lot of choice in the matter.
I felt there was something God wanted me to do.
Dorothy's decision was made, but it was only a very first step on this momentous journey. Would she be up to the challenge? Would any of us?
And so, on September 8, 1960, I entered the Novitiate of the Ursuline Sisters of Cleveland at the Mother House in Pepper Pike, the beginning of 5 years of religious formation.
She was introduced to prayer and communal life, spent time doing charges or chores in the Mother House, and taking classes taught by the sisters from Ursuline College towards a bachelor's degree.
Then, 1 year later, I was formally accepted into the novitiate and received the Ursuline religious habit with a white veil and was then called my clothing. I was given the title sister and the religious name Laurentine. The original Sister Mary Laurentine was martyred during the French Revolution. I told a friend, if they think I'm going to be a martyr, they have another thought coming. Next is my canonical year, when we focused on our vows in all aspects of the spiritual life.
That second year in the novitiate included intense preparation to consecrate her life to God and to help her fully understand this commitment. After those 2 years, she made the traditional religious vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience for a period of 3 years.
And because I'm an Ursuline, I professed a fourth vow of the instruction of youth. I received in obedience to complete my degree at Ursuline College, which meant that I'd be teaching at the secondary level. I have to say that I was disappointed in not being assigned to the elementary level. Nevertheless, I professed my temporary vows in August of 1963. I was now a junior professed sister. I'd been advised to major in business, so for the next 2 years, I took business and secondary education courses. And on June 1st, 1965, I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Ohio State 4-year provisional high school teaching certificate.
What was Dorothy like in the novitiate and juniorate? Her friend, Sister Ann Letitia, said, Dorothy had a sense of mothering about her. If you were crying, she'd cry with you. And if she were laughing, well, in the end, you'd wind up laughing because she just seemed to spark a sense of something that was deeper, and she'd help you carry that load. Mary Jo Lackamp remembers, she was probably one of the people who had the best and clearest motivation for being in the convent. I think it was ministry.
Soon, I was appointed to teach at Sacred Heart Academy in East Cleveland, and off I went. It was an economically deprived area with few Catholics, so we actively recruited students. I taught mainly business classes in a small garage the portable behind the school, which is freezing in winter. The students and I would sit in typewriters and coats, scarves, and even gloves, but we didn't really mind. Students would stay after class at the end of the day just to talk. I wanted them to know that if there was ever a problem, I would always listen and help. And there was also time to do community outreach and retreats to help alleviate racial discrimination, and to teach hearing impaired children on Saturday at St. Philomena Parish in East Cleveland. Then, in summer 1966, the Ursuline sisters decided to support the Cleveland Diocesan mission in El Salvador. This was in response to frequent papal requests for missionaries to Latin America. So, the following year, I wrote a letter of application to be considered for the Cleveland Latin America mission team. My request was denied because I was in temporary vows, but I was assured that I'd be considered to serve as a replacement in the future. I knew that being a missionary was what I really wanted to do, so I investigated missionary options in the United States. In 1969, I found a summer program teaching Catholic doctrine to Native Americans of the Papago tribe in Tapaway, Arizona. Beautiful people, slept outside under the stars, wrote pages about it in my diary. But back at Sacred Heart, our financial situation worsened. In the summer of 1970, I began graduate studies in counseling at John Carroll University. I enjoyed working with young people, but didn't want to teach business courses indefinitely. I always looked for a way to serve that would fill a special need. Unfortunately, Sacred Heart closed its doors in June 1972. I found myself sitting on the steps of my typing room crying and asking the other sisters, "Don't you wonder what God has in mind for us down the road?"
What God had in mind was an assignment to Beaumont School for Girls in Cleveland Heights, where Dorothy taught typing, but spent most of her time in the guidance department as she worked on her graduate studies.
I was involved with some of the more trouble girls until all hours of the night, but I completed my practicum in guidance at Beaumont and earned a Master of Arts degree. In July 1974, I received a school counselor certificate from the State of Ohio Department of Education.
Look for a way to serve that will fill a special need. It's as though Dorothy was being drawn to her mission, wondering what God had in mind for her, but also struggling to accept all that was expected of her. Just like us, she questioned both her weaknesses and her strengths.
And though she helped many who struggled with personal problems, Dorothy admitted that when she was younger, she did not readily discuss difficulties she was experiencing or decisions she had to make. She didn't talk a lot about what was going on inside, saying, "Well, that's just the way I am."
Sometimes I feel totally incapable of doing anything. Many things that I want are not what God wants for me. Reflecting on where I am at age 33, I feel that my growth up to now has been somewhat top surface. I now need to go deeper. Of course, Sister Martha Owen assures me that I'm open, and that makes me fearless. And that is my strength, to come back and survive time after time after time. But underneath my self-confidence, I question my own self-identity. I don't have all the pieces together. I'm not afraid to speak up, to say I do not understand this, or why do we have to do that? I've never let rules hold me down. I know where they fit and keep them in proportion. Major decisions, though, great difficulty. At critical periods in my life, I question my motives and values. In a journal before my final vows, I reflected on the question, why did I enter? I answered, running away, guilt feeling, escape artist, had to. Knew this was the only way I could be a good Christian. I asked myself, am I a good Christian? Am I living a Christian life? I profess what the church teaches. How many listen to the church? How many actually listen to me? You don't understand, sister. You don't live like we do. Am I witnessing to Christ? Do they really hear or see him in me? Am I a person to them, a person who is a Christian, or am I preaching to them? Am I real? So on a retreat in summer 73, I made resolutions to make an avid study of Christ, to make his attitudes my own, to do my meditation daily without failure, to remain free and open to the Spirit, to listen and then act on it. I examine the meaning of my religious vows.
Poverty.
Evaluate things in view of eternity. Will it be necessary there? Will it help me love God more?
Chastity.
Love fulfills a person. In this we do not give up.
and obedience
enables us to keep our will in conformity with God. As I've said in the past, be a living alleluia. I was once asked what I would like engraved on my tombstone, and I replied, I want to be remembered as an alleluia, because a Christian should be an alleluia from head to foot.
An alleluia from head to foot. Dorothy wrote that all her life, through her commitment to the practice of daily prayer, I can deepen my relationship with God, imitate the person of Jesus Christ, and listen and respond to God's will for me.
In the spring of 1974, Dorothy was chosen to serve on the Diocesan Cleveland Latin American Mission Team for a 5-year term, along with her friend, Sister Martha Owen, the second pair of Cleveland Ursulines to go to El Salvador.
Though I may appear to make up my mind at the last minute, I do privately seek advice. Even though for years I wanted to be a missionary, I did feel I was contributing a much-needed service as a counselor at Beaumont. I met monthly with priest-psychologist Ernest Hepner to discuss my options. Was it really a response to a call from God, or just my personal desire to go to El Salvador? A real Christian is a person with a mission to the world today, loves the world, is caught up with the world, listens with an open heart. A person who lives in the here and now. The church is people, the purpose of religious life to show Christ to the world. By poverty, you show your real interest in others, not yourself. The presence of God is in everything. An important part of my spirituality includes my love of nature. From my family's scenic trips to enthralling sunsets at the Ursuline Mother House, to collecting all sorts of things along the beach, shells, driftwood, and rocks, which I painted and brought home with me. Even a bird's nest. Spirituality can be a thing of joy which can overflow into the service of others. And spirituality can actually grow from our vulnerabilities. We think, I'm so weak, you're going to have to do it, God, because I can't. I'm just a little ship on a big sea, and I'm blowing every which way. When I want to know God's will, I always prayed about it. All of my life, prayer has been a crucial part of my spirituality. And as an Ursuline sister, it is the backbone of my spiritual life. This meditation by Cardinal Newman is my favorite.
God has created me to do him some definite service. I have my mission. I am a link in a chain, a bond of connection between persons. I shall do good. I shall do his work. I shall be an angel of peace. Therefore I will trust him, whatever, wherever I am. He may hide my future from me. Still he knows what he is about.
I am an Ursuline. This is the root of me. I recognize myself as an instrument of God. Listen to what he's saying. He wants you to do something special. I must overcome fear and lay down my life in the very service of others. Think of others first. So ultimately, through prayer and Father Hepner's guidance, I determined that going to El Salvador was indeed God's will for me. Nothing can hold you back from the call of the Lord.
And after my assignment to the Cleveland Latin American Mission Team for a 5-year term, Sister Martha and I first took an intensive course in Spanish at the Language Institute in Costa Rica, where we lived with a native family, swam in the Pacific, showered under waterfalls, climbed mountains. Fantastico. Then off to the parish of Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe in Chialagua in southeastern El Salvador. We arrived in December 1974. So much has happened since then. Archbishop Romero's assassination, Carla's death, army attacks on innocent villagers. I've had a 1-year extension until March of 1981, but now I must once again decide about my future. What other ministry options might be available? Can I adapt to the stricter religious lifestyle that I would be returning to at home? How can I ever go back and put a veil on again? I can't do it. Yet there's so much to do back at Beaumont where I have some security. I just don't know. Missionary work is what I love and I keep praying about it, but I just don't know what the Lord has in plan for me. Lord, strengthen me continually, that I may help others and thus relieve some of the evil in the world. I have come to do your will, Lord. Please keep me attuned to it. I come to do your will. I come to do your will. Surely my ministry must be where I'm needed most. But I want to explain my thinking, Martha. You know this last year has been one of violence and political turmoil. Last October, military officers overthrew the government and formed the first junta, a group of men that seized power, but a few months later it collapsed and the military formed a second junta. Now, the United States supports the second junta. The repression by the junta has expanded into the countryside, and resistors have joined together to form an opposition. They're the only hope for an end to the slaughter, and the only hope for democratic government for justice for everyone. The junta has begun a program of terror, trying to empty the villages and destroy crops to bring about starvation. And now there's a full-blown counterinsurgency war, a civil war. Just a month ago, 5,000 troops were deployed. 1,000 more refugees have fled as their villages were bombed. 6 of the resistant leaders have been assassinated. So we CLAM team members are trying to conduct our pastoral duties as normally as possible. We're experiencing increasing threats against the church from the Salvadoran military. We've had a catechist beaten up by the Guardia. Last Saturday, they were there when I arrived for Mass, and they just stood there through the whole Mass. Martha, I was shocked by the newspaper articles you sent me about the military aid the United States is sending to El Salvador. They say the arms are expected to come in regularly. Oh, it just makes you sick. And you really wonder how true it is and what's going to happen. There's so much going on that you really, really wonder how much longer we can survive. As I told you last year, Martha, I could not leave Salvador. I'm committed to the persecuted church here. We are making plans for refugee centers where women, children, and the elderly can be protected. We're influenced by the Marinol sisters who served in Nicaragua. They have given us lists of things to have ready for our potential centers here. The school in La Libertad would be an ideal place. It gives us something positive to focus on. I keep with me Mother Teresa's favorite prayer, "Dear Jesus, stay with me, and then I shall begin to shine as thou shinest, so as to be a light to others. It will be thou shining on others through me."
As Dorothy prayed in the months before her death, the violence and political upheaval of El Salvador reached several crescendos. Government terrorism increased. Father Paul Schindler, the head of the CLAM team, relayed, "The people are getting used to threats, and they haven't stopped them in most parts." What caused this terror, and why was it continuing unrelentingly?
I certainly didn't truly understand the political situation when I came to minister here. You see, El Salvador has a long history of domination by a ruling oligarchy. This country was conquered by Spain centuries ago and divided up into plantations, but the natives could keep living on communal lands. Then El Salvador gained independence from Spain and became a republic. However, the country continued to be controlled by famous 14 families, oligarchs who forced the natives to work as seasonal laborers. The oligarchs still own the land and exploit the people today. The natives began to rebel, so the oligarchs formed a national guard to control the farm workers. But workers' organizations increased. A workers' revolt during the Great Depression led to the massacre of 30,000 natives by the army. The Salvadorans called this La Matanza, the massacre. Since La Matanza, military governments have held power in El Salvador. But there was an extreme resistance again until the 1970s when left-wing opposition groups, mostly students, teachers, and workers supported by the Salvadoran Catholic Church, campaigned for basic human rights. The government saw these groups as terrorists and communists, and the government also included us in that group. Guerrilla groups began to form, so the oligarch created a vigilante organization called the National Democratic Organization, which had groups in every village to be the ears and fingers of the National Guard, the police, and the army. The military also destroyed democratic opposition with fraud in the electoral system. We arrived in 1974, as you know. By 1977, government violence reached epidemic proportions. The first attack against the Catholic Church was the murder of Salvadoran Jesuit Father Rotillo Grande. Then came the Escuadrones de Muerte, the first professional death squads. They began organized persecutions of union members, professionals, teachers, and laborers. They published death lists and disfigured and dismembered the bodies of their victims. It's incomprehensible.
Even though there were authentic reports of death squads and torturous murders, the United States approved a $90 million military aid loan to the Salvadoran government. That year was also the appointment of Archbishop Oscar Romero to the Diocese of San Salvador. He became the voice of his people. and like so many of his murdered brothers and sisters, Romero would suffer their fate.
But somehow, I hope that the reign of God is making headway, and for this I am grateful. We must be spirit-filled and challenging, and keep the people of Salvador before the Lord as we are literally living in time of persecution. We need his strength.
Sister Christine Roddy remembered that Dorothy didn't talk about it, she just did it. She would pick up a campesino on the road and made sure he had a place to put his machete or a sack of grain in the jeep. As Dorothy wrote, we hope to help them become people who can tame the land and put it at the service of humanity.
When I think back on our early days in El Salvador, I can see how naive we were. When we arrived, things were relatively calm. Martha and I spent a month with the clam team in Chirlagua before taking our Spanish course in Costa Rica. I recall our first night in Chirlagua. We were awakened at 4 a.m. by serenaders. Beautiful. The next morning, we met with women in Caritas Program, ate cornstarch soup, and went to the Pacific Ocean and swam in our underwear. Chirlagua is a very poor place. We had mass by candlelight as it rained and knocked out the electricity. Our work in Chirlagua and the nearby parishes is mostly pastoral, organizing the celebrations of the Eucharist and liturgies, conducting choirs, preparing villagers for receiving the sacraments, and training the native lay people as catechists. These catechists are like replacement priests because the priests can only get to some places once a month. It takes the priests a whole month to get through all the villages. We missionaries then visit every week by jeep or van. If the terrain is rough, we travel on horseback or motorbike, often alone. We conduct masses and celebrations of the word in the homes of the villagers. We guide the work of the parish. One of our main goals is to develop this lay leadership so that the work of the church can continue when we are gone. We teach them to read and write in the hope that they will teach others. As Martha said, there was constant working with the people, empowering them. Early on, we found our own ways of connecting with the villagers. We had the idea to distribute 10,000 bulletins that we printed about the church. Just a simple little bulletin telling when the masses are and how to participate. We go door to door and meet people, let them get to know who we are and that we're interested in them. So we went tramping around through the whole city one week, then started on the mountains the next. They're just so glad to have you visit their home. But probably the most important program is the Caritas Program. Many times we hear the word Caritas and we think love. That's actually what it's all about. Caritas de El Salvador is an extension of the love of people in other countries for the poor here in El Salvador.
Caritas was founded in 1960 and has been working since then with programs of community development and social assistance to the needy. International organizations such as Catholic Relief Service and the Agency for International Development volunteer to help make this program a reality.
Through Caritas, we fight malnutrition and lack of education. We have a mother-child care program bringing food into the homes of young children as well as expectant mothers. There's a program on food preparation, house care, nutrition, and child care. And there are times of fiesta too, with entertainment. So if you think love when you hear the word Caritas, you're thinking right. Love makes the world a better place. And loving your neighbor down here makes life a little easier for them. The year before I left for El Salvador, I found inspiration in the writing of Carlo Corretto.
Love transforms me slowly into God. Baptism has raised me to the supernatural state, but we must grow in this state, and the purpose of life is precisely that growth.
And charity, or rather God's love, is what transforms us.
Andres Pineda told of how Dorothy helped him as a lay catechist. She got together a group to go to the family program called the Family Office, just for parents, how husband and wife should respect each other. These kinds of things Madre Dorothea taught us, and we were then to go and teach others. Most of all, she helped us get over our fear, to make us more free with all the people. As she grew in her role, Dorothy realized that they are the Lord's little people struggling to survive, to make it through another day, and needing His daily loving help to do it.
But our ministry in Chirlagua was cut short because of staffing problems in nearby La Union. We were still new in Chirlagua, so the team decided that it would be best for us to go to La Union. So much here depends on us speaking Spanish to understand the people and figure out the programs. La Union is a lovely place. We call it the suburbs. It's got a great big beautiful church, the Church of St. Charles of Beaumont. And this is where we live, in the church. We are at the top of the church. It's just a wing stuck on. It's really fantastic. We do have our own rooms here and a bathroom that Martha and I share, but La Union has a terrible water problem. They have to store water, and there's not enough pressure, so we have to carry the water up.
In addition to pastoral work, they visit rural schools and teach doctrine to the children. The times they share with the people are so happy, but for the first time, they're directly witnessing Salvador's political situation becoming more unstable.
My parents want to come visit, but I told them that they'd have to wait because with the upcoming presidential elections, we don't know what's going to happen. There could be a coup, there could be trouble. We can't really have too many meetings and things going on because it's just a precarious time around here. There are 5 projects that we have begun in La Union. As I wrote to the sisters at Beaumont Convent, the first is a vocation program for girls that we've been planning for almost 6 months now. And we think we're sure of 3 vocations for the Native communities right now. When you're working in a country like El Salvador, where there are 16 Native priests in our diocese and 25 Native religious women, you have a population of 500,000 people and you realize the great need that is here. The other projects have been made possible by gift money from the Cleveland Ursuline Silver Jubilarians of 1975, a Proyecto Plata, or Silver Project. For the second project, we purchased 96 books with carrying cases and plastic bags. It rains inside these houses. They're all cataloged and the cases will rotate monthly. We're excited and the people are anxious for us to begin. Project 3 is probably our biggest. We put $1,000 into the parish lending cooperative. The money will be lent to buy fertilizer, and we are praying that with good growing weather, they will be able to turn the investment into food and money worth 10 times the original investment. Project 4 deals with a reading and writing program called Alphalete. We're going to provide support money to aid the volunteer teachers. Project 5 will help our promoters of health in the villages by equipping them with basic first aid necessities, which are impossible to get up into the mountains. So we continue, living through earthquakes, eating beans and tortillas in the villages, taking attempted suicide victims to the hospital, walking in the dust or water up to our ankles, removing knife victims from main streets, building houses, rebuilding churches, enduring the heat and mosquitoes, fighting malaria and dysentery, and just generally having a great time in the name of the Ursulines and the Christ who is Lord. God love you all. I see that missionary work is with the people and accompanying the people, sharing our faith. I'm inspired by their living of the gospel. We are working for the liberation of the people, to teach them how to better live their lives. I think of St. Catherine of Siena, and I long ago quoted her in my spiritual notes. Let Jesus be in your heart, eternity in your mind, the world under your feet, God's will in all your acts, and above all, may the love of God light you in all things.
Dorothy's spiritual searching included the thoughts of Teilhard de Chardin, whom she also quotes in her notes. Love is the only strength which makes things one without destroying them. Lord, lock me up in the deepest depths of your heart, and then hold me there until I am utterly what you would have me be. She would need her faith for the days ahead.
In December 1977, the parish in La Union was transferred back to the native clergy, and I was assigned to the parish of the Immaculate Conception in the port city of La Libertad. We're living nearby in the village of Zaragoza to offer a religious presence.
And reinforcements arrived. Jean Donovan joined the clan team in August 1979 to begin her ministry in Zaragoza with Dorothy and Sister Christine Roddy. 26-year-old Jean began working closely with Dorothy. It was understood that she would take Dorothy's place when Dorothy left La Libertad in a year.
There are clearly signs of approaching civil war. The Salvadoran Church has made plans for refugee centers so that women, children, and the elderly people fleeing from their villages can be sheltered from the attacks of the security forces and paramilitary groups.
Dorothy was extremely worried about the newest members of the clan team, so she wrote to Mother Bartholomew in February 1980.
Because there's a possibility of an insurrection in the near future, what is our responsibility to the new team members here? I personally would feel terrible leaving them on their own. Different people keep asking me if I couldn't stay on, at least for a while. Whether this is even a possibility or even necessary is what I'm not sure of. That is my dilemma. As I wrote to Martha, as things escalate politically, I haven't been mentioning much to my family back home. I keep telling them I'm fine and not in danger, but we're increasingly upset about the United States military aid to El Salvador. This past February, Archbishop Oscar Romero wrote a letter about this to President Jimmy Carter.
The Archbishop stated, "I am very worried by the news that the government of the United States is arming El Salvador by sending military teams to train Salvadoran battalions. I ask you, if you really want to defend human rights, to prohibit the giving of this military aid, and to guarantee that your government will not intervene to determine the destiny of the Salvadoran people."
Then 3 days later, members of our CLAM team wrote a letter to President Carter in support of Romero. We feel it is urgent to support the stance of Archbishop Romero. Giving more military aid will bring about greater violence. In our work, we have shared in the sorrow of families whose members have disappeared, been tortured, and killed. Under the present junta, suffering, violence, and repression have not been stopped but greatly increased.
In the early months of that year, the number of political killings indeed increased. Amnesty International reported nearly 1,400 cases of killings during the second week of March alone.
On March 21st, I was driving into Chacuitan on my motorbike to talk to a catechist, and I pulled up to find a husband and wife had just been shot. He had a bullet lodged in his face. What the Guardia does is shoot them in the face, and the bullet goes through one cheekbone into the other. His wife has her legs blown off, flesh hanging down and full of dirt. I ran back on my motorbike to get to the pickup truck. We put the man in the front of the truck, and I stayed in the back with the woman. You never know if the police are going to stop you. We've had police on the road every day since January. You never know what's going to happen. They did survive, but I can't believe how these people can endure all of this.
Then 3 days after that, an even more devastating shock. Archbishop Romero was assassinated while he was celebrating Mass. He was shot by a man hiding in the entrance to the chapel and died minutes later from a single bullet fired through his heart.
I still can't believe that has really happened. His final message in his homily that day was so strong. Archbishop Romero said, "I beg of you, I plead with you in the name of God, stop the repression, don't kill." During his funeral, there was a riot. Explosions and gunfire erupted in the square outside the cathedral. The crowd rushed into the church for safety. 8 or 9 people were crushed to death inside the cathedral during the stampede. Martha, please save this tape. I'm trying to give you as much detail as I can about what happened when, just in case I need it for anything.
One positive note, the CLAM team has more reinforcements. They've been joined by Mary Nill's sisters, Carla Piety and Ida Ford. They are experienced missionaries who worked with the poor in Chile.
Carla and Ida have no Jeep, so Jean and I help them move food, supplies, and refugees. We're going up north to Chalatenango, where the army is doing sweeps, and we're bringing refugees to centers around San Salvador. As Father Paul Schindler said, the military are killing priests like crazy, so we constantly have these debates. Should we go here or should we go there?
They knew they were being watched by the government and military forces who considered them subversives because of their work with the poor. So they were fearful of the danger, especially when driving alone in the isolated areas. But they thought they were safe because they looked so American. Jean used to say, they don't shoot blonde, blue-eyed Americans.
Oh, Martha, one of the worst things was right at the time we met Carla and Ida. 2 young men from nearby named Julio and Pastor were abducted, then brutally tortured, and then killed by the death squads. We found their bodies the next day, and Martha, they were hacked. Julio's eyes were pushed out. He was scalped. There were bits of skin. They had tried skinning him. One of them was decapitated. It's just why? Why? We're worried that this was a repercussion because these kids have been with us for celebrations and interested in being catechists. I talked to the mothers. Their faith is so great. Julio was a good kid, a really good kid. I could vomit every time I think about it. It's so sad and out of control. What I need, Martha, is money for medicines to have on hand. This may sound gross, but if you can, please find me any strategic first aid information on gun wounds, knife wounds, things like that. What to do about them, what kinds of medicines to use. Please don't panic the whole world and don't say anything to anybody else.
Then 6 weeks later, in July, 2 other young men from their parish, Armando and Carlos, whom they knew very well, were executed.
The genocidal killings continued. Dorothy told Martha, "It's miserable. We never know anything of the truth." They made arrangements for the refugees' protection. They could not stay in the hills, and transported the sick to makeshift clinics.
It just keeps coming. It's unbelievable, but on top of everything, Carla, one of the Marinol sisters, accidentally drowned trying to cross the El Chipote River in the Jeep while returning a prisoner to his village. Marinol sister Maura Clark, who arrived earlier that summer, had to come to accompany Ida. In September, I was out on my motorbike and passed 3 cadavers. The father of Margot, one of our catechists, was shot and killed by masked gunmen. I'm so enraged by these senseless killings after being here for 6 years and seeing the oppression grow worse every year that I wrote in a letter to President Carter. My reason for writing this letter comes from an experience I had yesterday afternoon when soldiers killed 10 people in one village and then marched up the road and killed another 10. I realize my experience is a very common happening here, but it's one that makes truly a person sick. And it makes a North American even sicker because of the help our country has given to the government here. Army soldiers make house searches at 1 o'clock in the morning, knocking down your door, demanding papers proving who you are. One young man was going down to wash down by the well. He got killed. One young girl, about 12 years old, held the words of a song which had been written to honor a martyred priest. The soldiers claimed she was a subversive and killed her. No words of explanation are given here. I really would like to know what you think of this situation, Mr. President, and whether you really realize how many innocent people we are helping to kill. How do you reconcile all of this? These genocidal killings, it's really disgusting. I mean, it's sick stuff. We are still responsible for these people getting killed.
In the last tape to her parents she would ever send, Dorothy said,
I am tired. My voice keeps going, but it's just because we've been running around a lot. We've been getting medicines for the sick and transporting them to hospitals. We're pretty much into this refugee problem. On Tuesday, we'll be taking medicines and stuff up to Chalatenango. That's another area that's bad news, but anyway, it's just one of those things you've got to do, so you do it. They wouldn't do anything to us. My plans are all up in the air. Nothing is ever definite, and that's where I'm at. Right now, I'm still not sure of what I'm doing or where I'm going or when I'm even leaving. Do keep praying for us. We're all fine. Maura and Ida left on Monday, a couple days before Thanksgiving, for a Marinol meeting in Nicaragua. We'll pick them up at the airport on Tuesday, December 2nd, when they return.
Unknown to the team, a death threat was made that very day. On Tuesday in Chalatenango, a death list with Maura and Ida's names and the names of every person on the parish staff was shown to a lay worker by an unidentified man who said, "Here is a list of the people we are going to kill, and today, this very night, we will begin."
Driving in our white Toyota van, we reached the airport Tuesday at 3 p.m., but Maura and Ida were not on the plane. Turns out they were coming in on a flight at 6 that evening and sent us a message to not worry about returning to pick them up. They'd take a taxi. Jean and I said simultaneously, we will go back for them. The plane landed safely at 7 p.m. We gathered their baggage and we 4 headed out.
At about 11 that evening, about 20 minutes northeast of the airport, workers in a pineapple field saw a white van passing and turning off into a dirt lane. It continued another half mile and stopped by an isolated area. Several gunshots were heard. 15 minutes later, the van passed again, this time with the lights on in the van, the radio blasting, and 5 men inside.
A Christian should be an alleluia from head to foot.
What actually happened in the 3 hours until the women's murders is still questionable. The most commonly accepted belief about the abduction is that they left the airport terminal and were stopped by National Guardsmen at the first toll station outside the airport. They were then interrogated, ordered back into the van, and taken to a deserted area outside the town of Santiago, Nonhualco. Here they were shot execution style. The guardsmen left the women's bodies sprawled along the roadside.
I want to be remembered as an alleluia.
In her last Clam Team letter to the folks back home in Cleveland, Dorothy wrote,
El Salvador is a country that is writhing in pain, and yet a country that is waiting, hoping, and yearning for peace. The steadfast faith and courage our leaders have to continue preaching the word of the Lord, even though it may mean laying down your life for your fellow man, in a very real sense, is always a vivid realization that Jesus is here with us. Yes, we have a sense of waiting, hoping, and yearning for a complete realization of the kingdom, and yet we know it will come because we can celebrate Him right now.
Dorothy would have been overjoyed to know that her life and her service made a difference, that each individual can change the lives of those near to them and afar. The fact that we learn and celebrate her message here today attests to the fact that she has succeeded. Can we each honor her with not only caring, but brave deeds both great and small? Can we carry on for her? Can we find a way to serve?